Hello everybody, my name is Spencer Walsh. Welcome to today's live episode of Newsflash, back here for our 3 times a week schedule. Sunday, Tuesday, and Thursday we got new episodes for you. Here's what's on today's one. Why the COVID vaccine, while it may seem promising, will not slow down the virus as much as we previously thought. New research from Columbia shows why vaccines alone will not end the pandemic, and restrictions may be necessary until at least mid-summer or later. Also, latest COVID-19 news: Biden officials are now working to apparently confront the vaccination woes as the president of Mexico gets coronavirus. We'll catch you up on all the latest stories across the globe. Meanwhile, in local Democratic politics, remember Alex Morse, a Massachusetts Democrat, pushed his party on its Alex Morse handling. Getting called an FAGGOT wasn't even the worst response. Meanwhile, in the Bronx, a big labor victory that everybody should celebrate. In Hunts Point, the market that really feeds New York, produces 60% of its produce, just went on strike and won in a big way, getting all that they asked for with no concessions. A pretty inspiring big labor victory here early in the Biden administration. We'll talk about that and more. This is Newsflash 474. Welcome to the show. And yes, we start with this new research here from the New York Times. They're reporting the coronavirus pandemic in the United States has raged almost uncontrollably for so long that even if millions of people are vaccinated, millions more will still be infected and become ill unless people continue to wear masks and maintain social distancing measures until midsummer or later, according to a new model by scientists at Columbia University. The arrival of the highly effective vaccines in December lifted hopes that they would eventually slow or stop the spread of the disease throughout the rest of the population. But vaccines are not enough, the model shows. And if precautions are working remotely, limiting travel, and wearing masks are relaxed too soon, it could mean millions more infections and thousands of more deaths. So, yeah, we are definitely in a place where the current restrictions should at least remain in place until July. My prediction probably is that they're not going to probably be in full effect up and through July, because again, they're not really in full effect anywhere right now. There are places in Florida where it's like COVID doesn't even exist. Like some of these red states, COVID does not even exist, and still incredibly relaxed. Even in places like California and Los Angeles, it still is not nearly as serious as it is taken in other places, especially more in the Northeast. I don't know why, but something about, we just got disciplined early on, and we just have not looked back since. But, yeah, it really could mean, again, millions more infections and thousands more deaths if they are lifted too soon. But still, there is no doubt that getting vaccinated protects the recipient. Still, several infectious disease researchers contacted by the New York Times cautioned that it would be months before enough people in the United States will have gotten shots to allow for normal life to begin again. Only then will the number of people with immunity, those who have had the disease and recovered, plus those who have been vaccinated, be large enough to take the wind out of the pandemic, said Jeffrey Shaman, an epidemiologist at Columbia who shared the team's modeling calculations. So Shaman estimates that more than 105 million people have already been infected across the U.S., well above the number of cases that have been reported. And his projection, so millions more infections are yet to come as the vaccine rolls out. So yeah, that is something that we will definitely, more people are getting affected with this thing every minute, and it's very, very unlikely that all the cases, it's accepted by pretty much anyone who has studied this at all, that there are a massive amount of cases that are just not being caught by this thing. So, so Shaman estimates that more than 105 million people have been infected. And he says the estimated total infections in the United States, if the current restrictions are in place until July, that is about 158 million total infections. That's the base expectation. So if we continue on our current track, we have 158 million. So If they're strengthened until late July, we will receive 19 million fewer infections from that 158 million. If they're strengthened until February, we'll see 9 million fewer infections. Lifted in mid-March, that will lead to 6 million additional infections. And their estimate is if the current restrictions are lifted in February, we will receive 29 million additional infections. So social distancing, masks, and other measures should remain in place until late July. And that may be optimistic, says Dr. Shaman. Otherwise, another resurgence of the virus is possible. So yeah, that is going to be a really, really tough thing to actually enforce because, again, that's just the federalist system of the United States that we live in. Each state is ruled by their own kind of like wacky person who has their own interests and their own like motives here. And I'm talking about both parties. We've seen it. We've seen Cuomo already talking about maybe easing up those restrictions a little bit just to try and open up that economy just a little bit sooner, especially again, like for the lockdown stuff to actually work, there has to get money flowing, and money, again, has to flow from the top. Lockdowns, for them to be successful, and then for them to be justified humanely, there needs to be enough money in play for people to feed their families and going to people for them to be able to feed their families, for it to be a justifiable choice to make. And because if someone's not being paid enough to lock down, if they can't work and they have to choose between feeding their families or following the rules, then feeding your families is a completely justifiable decision to make. And it's going to happen time and time again. People go out, people go to work, and people, again, the probably most diverse and most working class group of people, they're going to be the ones exposed to this situation more and more and more because the money will not come. And honestly, I definitely didn't trust the Trump administration to send that money and push it through the GOP Senate, and I don't really trust the Biden administration to do that either, just the way things are going right now. I think it's really hard to get that excited about it. It really is. It really is. And that is something that I think is really disturbing. So that's something we're really going to have to watch. So the coming months are critical in the race to reduce new infections and deaths. I mean, again, every point is critical, but the point is we just keep failing, and we just keep getting cast almost down worse and worse paths, and we just keep spamming the button that is causing us to go further and further off the edge in terms of coronavirus infections. At the rate, they're just absolutely skyrocketing. So these coming months, they're going to be very, very important, and lifting restrictions in early February after most healthcare workers and nursing home residents are set to be vaccinated would still mean far more infections in the long run than keeping restrictions in place until mid-March, for example. So, yeah, again, we already are seeing some pickup in the vaccinations, which is very, very encouraging. We are seeing a little bit of a change in that front. People actually getting vaccinated on the weekend at this point. Oh, it's just insane. But it's really encouraging. But we are still watching and looking for some sort of just assurance that things will be a little bit better. Here's what Biden officials have been saying. 4 Biden officials tried on Sunday to manage the public expectations about vaccine distribution as frustration grows among Americans over long lines, canceled appointments, and other daunting issues. The officials also tried to smooth over confusion about President Biden's goal of 100 million shots in 100 days of the administration. Dr. Anthony Fauci, the nation's top infectious disease specialist, called the figure a floor, not a ceiling, on the CBS program Face the Nation. And again, that is definitely something that should be the Biden administration's mindset. We'll see if it is actually true, and they treat it as a floor and not a ceiling. But Biden's remarks on, I believe, what was it, Thursday or Friday, that when I asked, hey, we're almost at that pace right now. We're almost doing about 1 million of shots a day. Shouldn't we maybe pick it up a little bit? Wouldn't that be a better idea? And maybe just because we can maybe do a little bit better than just 100. I know it's a nice number, but maybe we could do a little bit higher than that. Just goes, come on, man, give me a break. So if this is true, if this is the mindset that they're taking here in the Biden administration, that is very, very encouraging. So Fauci clarified that Biden was talking about doses, not fully vaccinated people. Within those 100 days, he said some 67 million people might have received the second of their 2 required vaccine doses, with another 37 million having gotten just the first dose. By Inauguration Day last Wednesday, nearly 36 million doses of the Pfizer and Moderna vaccines have been distributed to state and local governments. However, only about 16.5 million shots had been administered by that time. Along with Dr. Fauci, the 4 officials included Dr. Vivek Murthy, the president's nominee for Surgeon General, Javier Becerra, his nomination for Secretary of Health and Human Services, who, by the way, was not encouraging at all on CNN. I was just like flipping around at just sheer boredom today on the channels, and he was just there, just being like, we got a plane going a little bit down right now. We just got to stabilize it a little bit, and we'll get it up. It's like he's talking to kids. It's like, it was like you're talking to first graders here. Like, what is this going on? Just people want, like, even if it's a little bit BS, even if you don't really know what you're doing, at least just pretend to give a little bit more specifics and just like, guys, we got a plane. It's going down pretty hard right now, and we got to stabilize it, and it just won't have, like, just no clear answers to any of the questions that Dana Bash was asking on State of the Union, and it was really, really disturbing. So if we have a clip of that, we'll play it. But, Ron Klain, Biden's chief of staff, also was out there in appearances on the Sunday talk shows. Each deflected questions about whether Biden's goal was too ambitious or too modest. And also, when Becerra was asked about what Biden said was, we will not be able to make a dent in this over the next few months. That's what he was saying on press conferences, which was like, wait, whoa. But Bash was like, is that what you think as well? And he was like, well, we're not going to be able to do it overnight. And then Bash was like, but we can do it soon. And Bash was like, oh, are you going to make a serious thing? You will be able to make a difference. You will be able to make a change. And he was like, well, the plane's going down. It's nosediving. We just got to level it out. And it's not going to it was just absolutely infuriating. So Klain said that the vaccine distribution infrastructure inherited from the Trump administration needed to be fortified. There are many more bottlenecks needed to be cleared. We need more vaccines, we need more vaccinators, and we need more vaccination sites, he said on the NBC program Meet the Press. And there's going to be a certain point, well, yes, that is a valid situation. They haven't been in there for very long, but there is going to be a certain point where there's going to be pressure on them to actually deliver. And they can't just always blame and say, oh, the Trump administration left us a very, very poor infrastructure, and that just doesn't work. It's very, very hard to say, oh, well, Trump is a bad president. He did a bad job preparing us for this, when people are dying. The restrictions are still in place. We are still on a freeze as a country, and everyone's lives are being drastically affected. And you're still out there being like, oh, well, the Trump administration, they dealt us a bad hand. I'm sorry. What do you want us to do? What do you want us to do? Like, that just does not work after a while. I don't think we're at that point yet, but with this kind of talk and with this kind of progress, we could be approaching that point pretty sooner than anyone on the Biden team may want. So public health officials are eagerly awaiting the late-stage trial results of the one-dose vaccine under development by Johnson & Johnson. On the ABC program this week, Dr. Murthy said that that while the 100 million dose goal could be achieved with the vaccines from Moderna and Pfizer that were already authorized, he was hopeful about adding the Johnson & Johnson vaccine as well. So Klain batted away from the possibility that frustrated governors would purchase vaccines for their own states directly rather than relying on the federal government. He said, I don't think that's possible because emergency authorization for the vaccines means that federal oversight is required. So they're still going to have to work with that. But there is also inefficiencies that are happening at the state level, too. The governors have been also incredibly ineffective in solving. So I don't want to put too much of the blame here on the federal government because there is a lot of those bottlenecks coming from the state level as well. So Murthy said that the government also wanted to increase research on the virus treatments. He also mentioned dispatching mobile vaccine units to remote communities. Until now, vaccines have been given to mainly captive populations like nursing home residents and healthcare workers or in urban settings. Becerra compared the current pandemic situation, again, this really pissed me off when I was watching it in real time. Becerra compared the current pandemic situation with a severely hampered vaccine rollouts and the country hurtling towards 600,000 deaths to a stricken airplane. He said the administration would have to change its trajectory, but that would not happen overnight. So the quote is just so ridiculous. Just no specifics, no actual explanation of what they're talking about. Because again, that's the assumption with these people. It's like, oh, you silly Americans at home, you're too stupid to understand. We're just going to leave the smart doctors and all those people who are just like getting whispered in the ear of people like Johnson & Johnson and Pfizer and all the other big pharma people so that they can literally give away the rights to paying for it, as we saw over the weekend with Pfizer lobbying the government to charge them for that extra dose that they found there in the vial, but that's a whole other story. Getting a little ahead of myself. But there needs to be this kind of like much better communication aspect from the government, and I don't know if they're really hitting that mark so far.